Money is a deeply personal and often stressful topic. We look at the UK. In the UK, people rate money as their number one cause of stress in their lives. Financial literacy rates in the UK are among the worst in Europe, and 11.5 million people across the UK have less than £100 in savings. They're one broken boiler away from being in financial crisis. Now we look at the relationship between people and their banks. Not only do people feel that their banks haven't helped them when they needed it, in many cases, people feel that their banks have contributed to the problem. Banks have just started to sit up and take notice. Now, it's never been easier to leave your bank. Before, people had a relationship with their bank that lasted on average 19 years, longer even than the average marriage in the UK. Now, with services online that allow people to switch their bank or switch their mortgage, and the rise of neobanks like Revolut and Monzo, it's never been easier to leave. Banks are starting to realize that if they don't start to look after their customers now, they might not still be their customers for much longer. My name is Andy. I'm part of our Fostering Better Finance team in the dock. And we asked ourselves the question, how can we help banks to help their customers? For us, it starts with understanding them. We ran a 12-week qualitative research study with people from across the UK to learn about their financial influences, their money management routines, the relationship with money, and their banks. The result of that is the Money is Intimate research. And the Money is Intimate Expo that we're standing in now is the first part of our output. Come on in and take a look. To start, we've got a video that tells you about our project, our research, and our vision for what comes next.
This is Jack. Say hi, Jack.
Hi.
Jack is 39, married to Angela and a father of two, Max who's 4 and Zoe who's 18 months. The couple rent a 2-bedroomed flat in the quaint village of Hertford, and Jack commutes daily into Mayfair, where he works as a mechanical engineer. He makes a good honest living, earning just shy of £60,000 a year, and yet, Jack tells us,
I'm always stressed out by money. I don't understand. I make a good living and I'm still struggling to keep my head above water.
With 4 mouths to feed and 1 income, Jack lives with the daily pressures of providing for his family. He tells us due to the high costs of childcare, the couple decided it would be best if Angela stayed at home to focus on raising their children, a position Angela had never settled into but felt she had no choice.
I can't tell you the amount of sleepless nights I've had obsessing over where I can save money. I've been trying for 5 years at this stage to put away money for a deposit for a mortgage, but I'm still nowhere near. I don't really have anyone to talk to about money either. It can make you feel really alone sometimes.
Sadly, Jack is far from alone. He's just one of 66 million people in the UK and a far greater number globally who face their own kind of money struggles. Average UK unsecured household debt is now at an all-time high. 11.5 million people in the UK have less than £100 in savings. US credit card debt reached $830 billion in 2019. Worldwide debt reached a record $250 trillion in 2019. For banks, the landscape is changing. With new players, technologies and regulations, banks have an opportunity to solve problems for their customers or run the risk of someone else doing it. The Fostering Better Finance initiative is focused on helping banks help their customers, people like Jack. We spoke to real people across the UK to truly understand their relationship with money and their banks. Using behavioural science, human-centric research and data analytics, we will enable banks to foster new, better relationships with their customers and guide them with tailor-made insights and actions. As their relationships with their customers grow stronger, banks can expect their customer satisfaction and deposits to go up, customer churn to go down, and an overall uplift in revenue. This is an opportunity for banks to engage with their customers in a more meaningful way and support them along their lifetime journeys.
So one thing that people are often surprised about when they see this video is that our character Jack, who's based on someone from our study, is a relatively high earner. He's earning £60,000 a year. People think that these sort of financial problems, are more common with people who are low earners. That was one of the things we saw in our study. Stress, worries, anxiousness about finances is shared across all people within the population. We saw in the example it's This is just one of 66 million people who have similar struggles. Our project is going to be digging into how can we solve people across a range of demographics, salaries, incomes, not just for low earners or high earners. Another thing that people ask us is, does a bank really care? Does a bank really want to solve problems for people like Jack? Is a bank benefiting from people like that being in debt? Part of our project, and from some of our colleagues who are working with us on this, is to say yes, it is good business for a bank to do good and do well, be a profitable bank. Some of the advantages we can see from a bank focusing on helping their customers in this way is the longer relationships that they'd have with customers, from having, a greater understanding of them and greater trust. If a bank has a longer relationship, it might mean they can serve them better or serve them with better, more focused projects over a longer period of time. Another example is for a bank's own employees. We see that 69% of millennials say that they would prefer to work for a company that's socially responsible or has a good, purposeful mission. If a bank can say yes, focusing on helping our customers and our colleagues is part of our vision, that helps them to attract and retain their best talent. So, having been introduced to the project, now I want to show us the next part of our study and introduce you to Danny. We mentioned that the crux of our project so far has been the qualitative research we did with people across the UK. And the beauty of that is that rather than in a quantitative study where you might hear what a person is spending their money on, in here we hear the why about how people manage their money or what influences their behaviour. And so the lady we're about to be introduced to here, she's a representation of an almost unedited story from one of the scouts within our research. We hear her story through a couple of different lenses. In the first case, we're going to hear Danny tell us about herself.
So, my name is Danny, I'm 37 years old and I live in London. I live in an apartment by myself. I'm looking to move soon though. The rent in London is way too high. It's impossible to live in London. I work as a business development lead for a supply chain company. Pays pretty well. I don't know how long I'll stay there though. I've jumped around jobs a fair bit over the past few years. My passion is CrossFit. I love it. I do 3 to 4 classes a week. I'd do more if I had the time. It's pretty expensive too, but totally worth it. So, how do I manage my money? With a lot of stress. I would say that I have pretty bad financial anxiety. I've always been this way. I've got savings, I've got no debt, but money is still the main cause of stress in my life. I used to live abroad and the cost of living is so much higher here. It's been hard to adapt back. I feel guilty every time I tap my card. I try to use my Monzo account to manage my money. I transfer money there at the start of every month and I use it for things like my shopping, my food and anything I do for fun. I try to live off that. I find it's pretty useful and at least I can see where my money is going. I can't talk to anyone about money. I've got friends who I know are in debt and I think they think because I've got a good job and I've got money that I don't have any money problems, so I can't ask them. My mum is someone I can talk to, but she's no good with money either. And she had her own money troubles after my dad left her. So, what is my main goal? Retire at 50. I want to retire at 50. I like to think I'm pretty creative, so I'd love to retire and just do my own thing. The thoughts of it scares me though. I don't want to work forever, but it stresses me out to think of retiring in 13 years. Will I have enough to live on? What is enough? Will I ever be able to retire full stop?
Now, before we talk about Danny, I want to show you the second video where we see what does the bank hear when Danny speaks.
My name is Miss Danielle Arne-Smith. I live in London. I'm a 35 to 50-year-old female. My rented accommodation is a 2-bedroom apartment in northwest London 1. I am single. I might live by myself. I pay £1,800 a month by direct debit. I do not require a work permit or visa to work in the UK. My occupation is supply chain. The nature of my job is other. My basic gross pay is relatively high at £55,000 to £90,000 a year. My passion is CrossFit. I have a gym membership. I spend more on health and fitness than most of my peers or people like me in London. So, how do I manage my money? I've got a lot in savings. I regularly transfer money into a deposit account with the bank. I'll rarely dip into that fund. I never spend more than what I have. My spending is unusual. I transfer money at the start of every month into another personal account and, well, I'm not quite sure what I spend it on. I haven't got a mortgage or haven't had a mortgage with any providers in the past 12 months. It seems I've got no credit cards or debt. I've never been insolvent, bankrupt, or involved in any court proceedings for debt compounded with creditors. Oh, my first pet's name was Bruno, and my mother's maiden name was Lewis.
So, I think it's fair to say there's quite a bit of contrast between the story that Danny tells us about herself and the story that her bank might tell us about the same person. What we heard from a number of people in our study is that to them, they feel like they're just a number to their bank. It's not like before where people talked about their parents who had a relationship with their bank and their bank manager. They could go into to their local branch, shake hands, be asked about their family. Today, one guest into our expo said when he walks into a bank now, there's nobody there. There are just 7 machines, 5 of them take money, only 2 of them give money out. And that's the relationship he sees with a bank. This isn't to say that this is the perfect story a bank knows about Danny, but it's what she feels they know about her or what she feels they care about. So the purpose of Fostering Better Finance was not just to be a research project. The vision was that we would take the problems and the insights that we heard about in our research and then use those to come up with ideas that we could work on with the bank to help their customers. What we have here are our opportunity areas, and these are by no means the finished product. These are meant to be provocative and to start conversations with the bank to say how could we solve the sort of problems that we came across in our study. The first one I want to talk about we call dynamic goal setting. One of the people that we worked with, one of our panel of experts, was an independent financial advisor, and he says the first thing that he does with his clients is help them to set their priorities and set goals. People find it extremely hard either to set goals in the first place or to set realistic goals. And what can happen then is when people don't meet those unrealistic goals that they've set, they lose even more confidence in their financial abilities. We're saying who better than a person's bank, who, as we said, might know 19 years worth of finance information about a person. Why couldn't a bank help me to set and then manage and meet those goals? In the example we've got here, we have the case of me looking to set up a holiday to Asia for September next year. I said Asia 2020, it knows it's a holiday, and the bank, the first thing it could do was say, well, Andy, we know that you tend to spend about €980 on similar trips or similar goals. That's a good place for me to start. Once I set a deadline, I can be offered by the bank how they'd like to help me with this. Do I just want advice or coaching or a nudge every now and then? Or do I want it automated? Do I want them to do it for me? But it gives me that level of control. After that, they say to me, we're expecting this will be about $125 a month you'll have to save. But we know that not every month is built the same. So, in the like of December, when you tend to spend more, we can reduce that amount on savings. But don't worry about it. We can make that number up back in March and February when you tend to spend a little less. It means that the bank is helping me build my confidence in my ability to meet goals, and it's also helping me to be flexible and adaptive for when life happens. The next one we want to look at is a related opportunity, that we call not so unexpected expenses. At the end of our study, when we were doing interviews with the scouts once they had finished, we asked them, was this a regular month for you in terms of spending or money? And almost all of them said, no, this month was a complete anomaly. And when we, kind of asked them and said, well, what made it so unusual? They would say things like, well, it was Owen's birthday, I had to get him a gift. It was Valerie's birthday, we'd go out for that. The kids were going back to school. It was August when we were doing the study, so a lot said the kids were back in school, I needed uniforms, new books. And what we noticed was a number of the things that people suggested were things you could expect. Those birthdays are going to be the same time every year. Hopefully the kids will tend to go back to school at that time most years. And so we realize it's almost impossible or very difficult to always be on top of these things. We're saying, could a bank do some of that thinking for me and say to me in April, Owen, we know that the kids are going to be going back to school in September. Should we put a bit of money away now? Can we help you save for that so that when September comes, it's a much softer landing, no hard surprises. We have that example here in the case of preparing for a friend's wedding. So you see, we're preparing for Lily and Robert's wedding or for the stag do before it. And in fairness, our character has been already proactive in figuring out what's going to be spent. So they've said, look, it's about €250 with the accommodation, the travel, and some spending money. What a bank might be able to show us, based on what they know about me and my spending, is actually what's the true cost. What are the hidden costs that I'm forgetting about? So it might be the case of the haircut, the new outfit that I tend to buy, and the comfort food I often buy on day 2 after an event like this. Now, rather than be a shock, now that I'm aware of this, maybe now I can help prepare for it a little bit better. The next one we want to look at is an experiment that we're calling Death by 1,000 Cuts. One of the things that we asked our scouts to do during the study was share with us a sort of financial diary, a clean statement of where their money was going at the end of each week. And without us making any intervention, just by sheer observation, people said they were stunned by being confronted by this statement at the end of each week. It's something that often they hadn't been doing at all. And what jumped out at them was the amount of money that was being casually or mindlessly tapped away, that they weren't aware of, and that how much it adds up to. And so they said by the end of the month, by just observing that and by being confronted with their statement, they had already become much more mindful about their spending. One scout said to us that she went in while she was shopping and saw a dress she wanted to buy, but wouldn't buy it unless she could think of 3 occasions where she could wear it. And so we want to put this idea that this awareness can result in much more mindful money management. We want to put that to the test. So we're doing that in our own team. Here you can see our scoreboard, and we're tracking what we're calling our microtransactions. Microtransactions, for the purpose of this experiment, being anything of €10 or less. It's a small amount, but we want to see, just by being made aware of it, does that mean we get better at managing our money? What you can see is in our baseline that people in our team, it's about 50 times a month they're tapping their card or spending money on something for a tenner or less, a sandwich, a coffee, it could be a pint. But that adds up to about €220 on average per person. We had a guest in our expo last week who said that's a car over the course of 5 years. And we were saying exactly, that's the point that we're trying to make. If we were more conscious about where that money is falling out of our pocket, could we be better with it? It's not to say that every spend of less than €10 is a waste. I know Sarah on our team, for example, would say that coffee is an investment, but it's just being a little bit more conscious of it might make us a little bit better with money over time. You can see from the people who've checked in on January, the results are promising, but we'll have to check it out now over the next 3 months to see if there's really something to it. So the next opportunity we want to look at, we call bank within a bank. What we're getting at with this here, it's an interactive exercise, but is the opportunity for people to take back a little bit more control over their finances. What we heard about in our study, and it's something many of our guests have said they have the exact same experience with, is uneven spend velocity. Now when we say spend velocity in our study, we mean the rate at which somebody is spending. We had one person in our study say that he lives like a prince at the beginning of each month when the salary lands, and he's living like a pauper by the end of the month. We wanted to kind of get across in this exercise how difficult it can be to manage all your money for a month up front at once, with the example of being your salary landing, at the beginning. Guests in our expo would have 90 seconds to distribute their money in these different areas, their utility bills, their rent, their savings, their living costs. We've got some other ones down here, like fun stuff, personal shopping, and the kicker is when the person's about 3 weeks into the month or about 60 seconds into their 90-second game, the boiler breaks down and we've a hidden bowl elsewhere, and that's getting across that, with this uneven spending pattern or uneven spending habits can be really, really problematic if something unexpected happens and we're not prepared for it. One of the examples we're suggesting is, could I be my own banker? As in, if my bank is to pay me my salary, could I have it so that some of it is cordoned off to pay my fixed expenses straight away without me even worrying about it? And as for the rest, can I pay myself maybe a mini salary week to week if that's what works for me? But it gives me an element of control, on top of what I already have. The last opportunity we want to look at is what we call building financial self-worth. We've already seen 2 examples of people in our study with Danny and Jack in our first video, of people who are extremely worried about their own financial situation, and often they're comparing themselves to others, very often unfavorably. We had people in our study who were working in really good jobs, but were looking at some of their friends being on holidays all the time, or comparing to their friends or family who were living in London and the life that they lived compared to themselves. And it was having a real effect on their overall well-being, comparing their financial situation to someone else's. We're saying, could a bank use the wealth of data that it has about me and my peers and everyone else to give me true benchmarks and realistic ways of comparing myself? Maybe it's me versus, myself last year, and even that could be a good way of guiding me towards progress. Another thing we see is that there's a wide spectrum of financial literacy across the UK, where some people genuinely don't understand what's placed in front of them when they see a banking form or a mortgage application. And so how can a bank meet someone where they are at their own level of financial literacy or their own capability and begin to help them from there? The last thing that we get at with Build Your Financial Self-Worth is that key sort of element of understanding that we spoke about at the beginning and we heard from Danny in our second video. Can a bank begin to target people and work with people and serve their customers, not just thinking about them in terms of their demographics, their age, their gender, their location, but instead, can they get a richer understanding of the customer's personality and behaviours? And then can we begin to segment customers and work for them based on who they are rather than the area they live in or the salary income bracket they're in? What we have here is sort of a quiz that people who've come through our expo have taken, and it asks them questions outside the norm of what you might be expected to be asked from your bank. All of it should be readily available. There's nothing terribly personal in it, but it can get to really interesting insights about who the person is. You can see some of the examples about how often somebody does personal shopping, how often they bring or make their own lunch to bring to work. We have one that you can see here is very prominent on the no category. Does someone have an Amazon Prime account? Simple questions like these might seem like a bit of fun, but they can be really, really insightful in terms of who a person is. It's a small example to explain the metaphor we're getting at, that if a bank really made an effort to understand their people, we think they could really serve them a lot better. So, that's our Money is Intimate exhibit. Hopefully you enjoyed it. For anyone who's interested in sharing this research or facilitating this exhibition elsewhere around the world, we hope that you're looking forward to bringing to life the complexities, the opportunities, and the intimacy of the stories that we heard from the people in our research. Thanks very much.